Welcome everybody to this EUPRERA talk. My name is Jesper Falkhammer. I am currently the president of EUPRERA, and I'm really happy to welcome you to this interesting webinar with several excellent scholars that will speak about leadership and well-being in the communication industries, a topic that is of high relevance. The moderator, Martina Topić, can tell you more about the background of this talk. But as far as I know, it was actually based in a EUPRERA thematic network and a project called Women in PR, highlighting, of course, issues as stress, increase of burned out co-workers, especially, of course, in the communication industries and so forth. This is a very, very important question to discuss. And I leave now the screen, or I will actually leave it together with Martina. So thank you very much for arranging this webinar, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's early morning in Alabama, and of course, good afternoon to those of you in Europe. There is a greeting I never believed I would say. So welcome to this webinar. I'm Martina Topić. I'm an associate professor in PR leadership, and also I lead EUPRERA thematic network on women in PR. As part of the network, we did a lot of research on well-being in communication industries, and we are currently working on reports which will be released in open access as part of EUPRERA. We are preparing a special issue, we are preparing a book, and then we also have this webinar. The webinar consists of scholars who have done work as part of the EUPRERA network, and also those who didn't, but they have done something else, which is very relevant, and they collaborate with the network on this research and publications. So in this webinar, we will talk a little bit about what constitutes excellent leadership, how leaders look after well-being of their employees, and then a little bit about original research that each member of the panel has conducted so far. So I will let panel members now come in and present themselves. So we can have, we have Dr. Nicholas Eng from the University of Georgia in United States. We have Dr. Michal Chmiel from Royal Holloway University of London in the UK. We have Dr. Anca Anton from University of Bucharest in Romania, and Dr. Raluca Moise from City University of London in the UK. So a very international panel that has very different perspectives on this important issue. So I'm going to start by asking a first question, because we have a panel structure here rather than traditional presentations. So what constitutes excellent leadership? There's been a lot of talk about this in literature over many decades, and we are looking into this from the perspective of well-being. So I'm just going to ask questions based on who I see on the screen first. So Dr. Eng, would you like to start and tell us what constitutes excellent leadership in your view?
Thank you, Dr. Topić. So in the context of mental well-being in the workplace, we see excellent leadership as one where organizational leaders, so whether it's your communication managers or the C-suite executives, when they become advocates for mental health and well-being. So our research shows that when employees actually perceive higher levels of organizational support from their superiors, they tend to rate their subjective well-being and organizational commitment higher. So our research really echoes the US surgeon, Dr. Vivek Murthy's framework for workplace mental health and well-being, suggesting that leaders and managers should really create this culture that includes modeling, communicating, regularly protecting, and supporting workers in the context of mental well-being. So in our view, excellent leaders are ones that actually model and normalize a supportive culture around mental health in the workplace.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting with a focus on mental health. Dr. Anton, what is your view on this issue? What is excellent leadership?
Yes, well, to some extent, it echoes what was said previously. So In my opinion, I think when we talk about well-being and leadership, when we connect the two, it's important for leaders in organizations to see, at least in the context of my research, to see well-being and everything that's associated with it, not just as a perk, for example, but associated with a lifestyle and with the continuous engagement with the employees. So, of course, we are talking about different, let's say, geographical spaces, different cultures, and that really, impacts the journey and the discussion about well-being. In our case, of course, in Romania, there is an increasing discussion about well-being that managers, particularly, let's say, in communication agencies, have to deal with, particularly because there are more Gen Zers coming in and contributing to a discussion that has been, opened a lot by millennials, such as some of us are. So it's just about, as Nicholas was saying, about normalization. I think we are a little bit back, but I'm glad that there is a discussion about it, and the transition from well-being as being as an exceptional topic to it being, a regular day-by-day topic in the discussion between management and employees.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Chmiel.
Yes, thank you for this question, Martina. I think that there are a couple of trends or troubling phenomena that has affected most of the industries, but especially the communication industry, one of them being fake news. And related to fake news is how many managers, but also academics, are looking into what is the concept of truth, what is objective, what is normal. We've all heard coming back to the new normal. What is this new normal? And I think building on those notions of truth and fake news and credibility, one thing that we've been looking into when thinking about the data from the UK is the relationship. So for me, a leader who is an excellent leader would build honest and truthful relationships. And there are obviously different qualities that are needed to build an honest and a relationship that is based on truth. But one of those qualities is actually listening. With the notion of listening, you can actually determine how different audiences, including employees, how they understand and define their well-being. So I think with this great turn towards audiences, we need to re-examine what an honest relationship means for a manager, so that he can actually start listening and understanding their colleagues.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Moise, your view on excellent leadership, please.
Thank you so much, Martina. Well, thank you for this question. My perspective is informed by historical analysis. So I looked at how leaderships and how leaders have been, what was the talk in sociological studies, but also in cultural studies. And I identified a transition from this image of strong leadership, of what it means to be a strong leader, which was always framed in terms of strong, decisive, having a very clear view of what they wanted to do and how they wanted to achieve, but also how they wanted to achieve it. And we see this transition more towards a caring type of leadership and more towards a a leader which is focused more on being empathetic to their followers. And I think that two dimensions define today's leader and also today's leadership in communication industries as well. Looking at all sorts of surveys such as European Communication Monitor. So there are two dimensions. The first one is empathy and the second one is charisma. And I think that the empathetic side of the leader is definitely something that is well linked to well-being. And that's what I'm going to talk more about in the second question. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So these are all very interesting perspectives. So listening, charisma, we talk about mental well-being, which is very interesting. because the question we could ask is then how excellent leaders look after well-being of their employees. So I'm going to start with Dr. Nicolas Anca again.
Thank you, Dr. Martina. So we know from industry survey data that PR professionals actually work in an environment that is super demanding and high levels of stress, and they overwhelmingly work long hours and more than the typical 40-hour work week, and they take less mental health leave compared to employees in other sectors. So I believe that the first step for excellent leaders to take in looking after the well-being of employees is to become aware of and acknowledge the unique challenges that are facing communication professionals, which really goes back to what Dr. Chmiel said about listening to the employees. So when organizational leaders listen to the needs of the employees, then they're able to actually develop well-being initiatives and programs that their employees not only need, but they also want. And then for the second step, it goes back to my first response, which is that they need to model and normalize mental health care within the organization. So some ways include signing the National Alliance for Mental Illness Stigma company pledge, providing employees with well-being initiatives like mental health assistance programs, or just having these open and empathetic conversations with their subordinates, which is what Dr. Moise was kind of talking about, where organizational leaders that are excellent are those that actually pay attention to cultivating this supportive organizational culture around promoting mental well-being.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. Particularly, again, we hear empathy. So I'm going to ask next Dr. Moise to add to this, please.
Thank you so much. I think that's exactly what European Communication Monitor last year's edition showed at European level, that it's this empathic leadership is building on some key pillars or key dimensions again, or key traits. Empathy referring to standing in the shoes of another person. So exactly this comes back to listening, but also being in touch with the people that you lead. Not just because usually the leader has been for so much time depicted as the person who leads the herd, but it doesn't have to be necessarily also in touch with the people or the followers and the people that they lead. So this is something that definitely European Communication Monitor showed and stressed out as being very important. To my colleagues' earlier point, another which is very linked to the dimension of mental health, something that is widely debated is how exactly communication professionals are being heard and listened by their leaders in this struggle of being able to handle their jobs despite the weight of their demands. And I would like to stress out here a very, very key point on female communicators who have been identified more likely to suffer from mental health problems, and they indicated less commitment to their organization due to this, due to their own challenges. So I think this would be very, very interesting to see how, from my colleagues' data, also gendered results and gendered findings will reveal some interesting insights in terms of leadership and well-being.
Okay, Dr. Anton.
Yes, so there are several, of course, there are always a lot of things that can be done. So there are several things that I think would fit this question. One, I think Raluca was mentioning, and also Nicolas, listening, but I would also say speak up on behalf of employees. I think that, as you mentioned, the stress is enormous, and I think there is stress from the personal life and from the professional life. I think that communication professionals are confronted with different problematic situations, and it's important for them to feel that they are backed, by management in the decision that they make, that they are protected. So I would say that management should try to act as, let's say, an advocate, and that will contribute enormously to the well-being, to the mental health, as was mentioned, of employees. People will not feel that they are alone. That generates an enormous amount of stress. I think we all know that. Another aspect that I think it's important to add here is constancy. So always try to improve the well-being of the employees, not just doing something here and something there, you know, the old paradigm of let's do a Christmas party, let's do a picnic. This is something that has to be done on a day-by-day basis, not, you know, just some exceptional activities that make people feel good or that make management, you know, tick the well-being box. And another, the third thing that I would add here is about synchronization. Enable employees to synchronize the challenges of their personal life and professional life, but also synchronize between employees. You know, we all have our own rhythms, and sometimes challenges to well-being and to mental health associated with it come actually from not being synchronized with the challenges that other colleagues face. So I think that this is something that is not necessarily addressed too much, but acting as a mediator also contributes to this idea that leaders can be or should be the fundamental pillar or constructors of well-being within their organization.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my
Thank
contribution.
you. That's very interesting. Dr. Chmiel.
Yes, building on those all very important points, and especially on the last one about synchronization, I think that two separate points need to be additionally raised. One of them is that leaders need a fully developed architecture of listening. So this not only means establishing good individual relationships with their employees, but this also means using different tools, using secondary research, like, for example, European Communication Monitor, which was mentioned by Dr. Moise, but also using qualitative and quantitative research tools to understand better expectations of employees and organization, and to understand how well-being is defined, what are the expectations associated with well-being. So this is not only personal individual relationship, it is also using different various tools to understand better the expectations of employees. But there is also this second element, which is quite unique to the PR and communication industry, which is, I think, one common element that would resonate well both with practitioners as well as academics, that PR is about building relationships, and building relationships doesn't end at 5 p.m. when you finish your work. And I think that our data also shows that it puts additional strain on practitioners, and a good leader that thinks about well-being takes this additional strain into account to offer more flexibility, because especially in the PR and comms industry, where part of your work is networking, meeting with colleagues, but also journalists, different influencers, this may not happen during your usual work time. So those great leaders would actually think how they can accommodate different personal life expectations, family obligations into the workload, but also make it more flexible, so that, well, ultimately, people working in this industry, our colleagues, are not overworked and can actually take pride and joy in building those relationships.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dr. Moise.
I think it's a great question. I mean, I think it's a great conversation, and the points that Dr. Chmiel just made about the care that an empathic leader has towards a diverse staff and diverse employee pool has multiple dimensions and has multiple elements. I immediately, when Dr. Chmiel mentioned this, it reminded me of one of the studies, and I think, of course, Martina, you have published extensively on this particular subject of performative roles and what is expected of women, how to perform on their professional roles in PR and communications. And these gendered representations and these performative roles, they do have, of course, an impact on the way that women are being perceived as leaders. And this is something that, again, might definitely have an impact on the way that they see themselves and in the way that they are being valued within an organization. I think that more qualitative data is definitely needed to connect these two elements between leadership and women, and how they are supported in the workplace. But also to discuss more, and why do I advocate for qualitative research here? Because there are internalized stereotypes and internalized biases and internalized structures that do have to be connected to the women professionals' well-being as well. So when Dr. Chmiel talked about this pressure of always being networked, which of course immediately excludes primary carers, parents and family who have professionals who have families, of course, this immediately reminds me of so many studies who have addressed these particular elements who are so pervasive in the occupational field. And I think definitely it needs more discussion, it needs more conversation, and this always happens from qualitative research. But your work, Martina, was definitely trailblazing in this respect.
Thank you very much. I will now ask some questions about original research that members of the panel have done, either as part of the EUPRERA network of women in PR or in other projects as well. I'm going to start with UK because whilst I now work at the University of Alabama in the US, I was previously in the UK, and Dr. Chmiel and I were working on a UK study, and this is how we started the research, and then it was taken into other countries. So Dr. Chmiel, would you like to say something about UK findings on well-being and leadership in communication industries first?
Well, yes, of course. So there are a couple of interesting findings and a couple of connections we were able to establish between some personal characteristics of employees in the UK industry and the overall satisfaction with life and well-being. So overall, the first and not so much, unfortunately, surprising finding is that this is men, not women, who are more satisfied with their jobs. This obviously echoes to what previously Dr. Moise and Dr. Anton said, but we were trying to understand better the reasons behind women taking less pride with their jobs. So we were looking also for additional factors. And somewhat surprisingly in this regard, all of those who were in some kind of relationships, that being in any sort of partnerships or married, experienced more satisfaction with jobs versus less. So the group which is significantly less satisfied with their jobs and with their life are singles, and especially single women, which may shed some light onto, again, how important are relationships in their private lives. I'm thinking about this finding in terms of a certain safety net that is provided by your significant others, by your families, by people who constitute your immediate personal environment. Because somehow those who were in those relationships were a bit better off. But obviously, there were other significant findings which explained both life satisfaction and job satisfaction. And all of those findings point to the role of a very flexible manager. So whenever a manager expressed support and accommodated, provided changes to make sure that individual life plans and goals and lives are better taken into account when we're planning workload. In all of those instances, the respondents in the UK sample experienced more job satisfaction and more life satisfaction. For example, one additional finding that would support this general notion of a safety net was finding that colleagues in organizations who were accommodating for family needs, so not only managers accommodating, but also colleagues accommodating for family needs, this increased job enthusiasm, which again shows that when you can flexibly plan your workload and your day, thinking about the networking doesn't end when your official work time ends. It all led to greater experience of life and job satisfaction. And additionally, something which is kind of a new finding, one of the strongly contributing factors, both to life satisfaction and job satisfaction, what was a declared lower concentration on work, which implies that there are some other things in life which are much more important, which also tells us that the generation of the 80s and 90s, where your work was your sole purpose and was your key focus, is now long gone. Now, at least in the communications and PR industry, participants want to connect with their families, want to balance their workload, want take satisfaction and pleasure from other areas of life and not only their jobs.
Okay, that's very interesting. Dr. Moise, would you like to add something?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, Martina. And just to build on what Dr. Chmiel said, I think there's definitely in the public discourse and also we can identify and we can see a change of attitude towards work. We see younger generations emphasizing more, as Dr. Chmiel said, other areas of satisfaction in their life, relationships, friends, and all this concept of older generations of being always on and always working and being kind of always seeing satisfaction and meaning in your work, and this is something that definitely can be seen also through the rise of freelancing and other types of flexible working schemes in the communication industries. Definitely, there is more agency coming from individual employees and professionals in communication industries. They want to take charge of their professional life more than, let's say, older generations who have been used to a different type of mindsetting, and definitely what positively can be described as work ethics. Sometimes it seems like for younger generations doesn't pay off so much. I think these changes have been, of course, progressively developed, have been progressively happened. They didn't happen today, they didn't happen yesterday. And this attitude towards work is something that can be further elaborated also from different aspects. My research, together with Dr. Anton, was more focused on freelancing in communication industries. And definitely we have seen from our research, but also previous research, this need to take charge of their professional life, to have more space, to have more agency in the way that they control their relationship with former employers and in their capacity as of freelancers, clients, in the way that they manage their time, in the way that they manage their families. So definitely looking to balance more this work and personal life areas. Some of the key insights that we found is that freelancing didn't necessarily always come with happy times, with the promises of the happy times and of freelancing. That definitely it's something that many freelancers in public relations, but also more broadly communication industries, have stressed through their own public narratives in the way that they speak at events, but also in the media, in the industry, in the media industry. They talk a lot about balancing these areas that is still considered to be a struggle. But I think we see, to going back to the idea of leadership, leaders are definitely the ones who are called upon to help with these struggles and with this balance between work and personal life.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Anton.
Yes. So I would start from saying that in the communication industries, we are very lucky and privileged to have a field for which people are passionate. You know, people working in communication are passionate about their work. It's not a job, it's a calling, it's a passion. So and this kind of sets us apart from other industries, not all other industries but other industries, because here you will find people who are in, you know, totally passionate, doing everything because they love and because they identify with it. That being said, it's easy to go into workaholism. It's easy to become entrapped by your passion. I'm also saying that as someone who might be entrapped in in her work. But it's important, I think, for leaders to mitigate that, to help people achieve a balance if they see that someone is going a little bit beyond that well-being, that mental health, line. You know, if you see someone doing a bit too much, you should be able as a leader to activate, or to have that human approach, where you don't say, oh, I like that because that's generating more revenue for my company, and say, I don't care about that, I care about the person. So I think that's a major thing that managers need to do, that leaders need to do more than managers. And it's something that came out of the results of the well-being survey that we did. So what stood out to me is that this idea of overwork, of overloading, of burnout is discussed. So discussing about it is kind of the norm. Oh, I'm tired. Oh, I have so much things to do, so many things to do. Oh, this and that. Oh, me too. Right? But the thing is that managers will talk about that, will commiserate to some extent, will show understanding, but too few of them, according to the data that I got, are actually doing more, are acting on it. Right. So this concern, this let's say dialogue based concern, does not spill into actions. So that is a real issue, because concern at some point becomes performative. Right. Oh, I commiserate with you, but then I will not set in place the proper mechanism for you to actually manage your work life in accordance with your personal life, and to have that balance that we are all aiming for, even defining your balance. So I think that at least for my data, that there is a real need for an actual jump, and not just an organizational jump, an industry level jump, from just talking about it to actually normalizing the inclusion of this of well-being into all organizational actions. Right. So I think that is the thing that came out of the data that spoke to me as a former communication professional, now in academia, and spoke to me in relation to all the professional acquaintances that I still have. It really says a lot about where the industry is, because at some point leadership needs to be discussed not only at organizational level but at industry level. And the communication industry, particularly in a small country like Romania, we kind of know each other. So it's important to make that advancement at industry level, not just organizational level, and that's where industry leadership comes in.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Eng.
Yeah, so great thoughts from everyone. And so for us, we conducted this study as part of the larger North America Communication Monitor study. And so this one was focus really on well-being. And so we wanted to examine the well-being initiatives and programs that are being currently offered to full-time communication employees, and to also identify predictors of employee subjective well-being in the workplace. So we surveyed 262 full-time communication professionals in North America, and we found that across our sample, communication professionals are indeed being offered a range of different health and well-being programs. So like mental health assistant programs, flexible working hours, and internal counseling programs. And we also found that the number of well-being programs actually positively predicted people's perceptions of the organization's attitudes toward and attention to mental health in the workplace. So what this means is that the more well-being programs an organization offers, the more people actually perceive that the organization cares about mental health. But I just want to caveat this finding with other speakers who have talked about the need for qualitative research, because right now we're just seeing quantitative numbers that tell us that the number of well-being initiatives increases people's perceptions of organizational attention. But we are unable to actually get at the quality of these well-being initiatives and whether or not these are things that people actually need and they feel that it's actually helping with their well-being. And some other high-level kind of findings that we had was that ultimately, like other speakers have talked about, perceived organizational support was a really strong predictor of organizational commitment and subjective well-being. So it really is a matter of how do we create this supportive culture where employees actually feel that they're being supported, feel that it's okay to take some time off of their work to care for their mental health, because ultimately it does help them in the long run in terms of not burning out. And one final point I want to make is that, interestingly, in our data, we find that managers compared to non-managers are actually participating in these well-being initiatives more often than non-managers. So that means that it suggests to me, at least, that at some level, the people who are already kind of like more senior in their careers, they are able to actually start saying to themselves, okay, it's time for me to take a break. I need to actually care about my mental health. But for some people who are maybe just starting out with their jobs, they may feel this like extreme pressure that they have no choice but to keep on working in order to, get the promotion or to climb up the ladder. And so there is some kind of an interesting conversation to be had about how can we then make sure that the people who are just entering the industry are being supported.
This is really interesting. And some of your answers reminded me of one LinkedIn post I've seen once, which says, remember people, it's PR, not ER. And it seems to be a common theme particularly for PR from these findings, that relationship building in a way, and the fact you can't switch off and stop working affects your well-being. So I'm just going to ask one of my last questions is basically, what could an excellent leader then do to foster this well-being of employees and to support their employees? In your view, you can draw either from your findings or just an opinion based on all of your research you've done. So I'll start with Dr. Chmiel.
Based on all of the previous responses, they need to start listening in a structured, professional way, which first of all means being aware of the problem, but secondly, start asking questions and collect responses, whether this is to understand causal relationships between data or more qualitatively dig into personal perceptions. Because well-being can mean different things and of course can different facets. It is associated with emotions and affect. It is also associated with personal confidence and perception of the workplace. So starting to listen is the number one thing. Because one of the key findings, especially when we looked at those who are employed in organizations in the communication industry, was the critical component of the values alignment. So those employees, those communication professionals who see that their values are aligned with organizational values seem to be more satisfied with both their jobs and both their lives. And interestingly, the component of job satisfaction is a very strong predictor of life satisfaction. So exploring further, what are the values? What is the organizational purpose? Especially in this very difficult time now for, in many countries where organizations suffer, where employees are endangered with redundancy, we should not only focus on the money and the profit. We need to remind ourselves about those important themes from before the pandemic, how important the purpose was in terms and on the level of brand purpose, but also organizational purpose, because these two are closely linked and also are related to well-being. And very finally, there are also things that did not manifest in at least the UK sample, which also should point our direction, point our attention to certain themes that are not present. And this is, I would say, the organizations which used to be based on knowledge and development. So in these areas, none of the employees indicated, or the data didn't show any connection between how supportive in terms of knowledge and development was for the well-being and life satisfaction. Just recently, I went into an office which was recently changed from an open office into a hot desk office. And in this more than 100 square meters big office with more than 40 hot desk stations, I only saw one employee working. And this is quite significant, that we are losing one important element of organizational culture, that is community, knowledge exchange, and knowledge building. So while those individual relationships need to be further explored and well-being needs to be understood, the more organizationally focused view should not be also lost, because ultimately we are also producing and contributing to developing new knowledge, regardless of the industry we are in.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Dr. Moise.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I just wanted to stress out maybe another layer of complexity and to talk about organizations' leadership, because I think that a lot of what we addressed was more on the side of individual leaders. And I think organizations, and when we talk about communications industries, we talk about agencies, we talk about employers from so many perspectives. But I think that the pressure that comes from, it's a good and positive pressure which comes from younger generations of employees who are more critical and more selective in the way that they actually look at the first job or the workplace. They look very much at the workplace culture as well. So this comes with a reset of the way that organizations employ these mechanisms, as Anca said before, of training and equipping managers at different levels of organizations to become better leaders for their own teams. Because I think that one element that we could see from today's discussions is that more expectations of leadership are built and related towards managers, middle managers or team managers. They have to have more and to enhance their leadership skill set as well. So I think that everything that we discussed about listening, about going beyond performative leadership, this is where organizations can come and to actually help their employees to become better leaders. But yeah, that's pretty much from me.
Thank you. Dr. Anton.
Yes. So that being said, starting from the listening dimension, and from what Raluca was saying, I would just like to point out that at some point organizations also need to understand that they are not or should not be the center of their employees' life. And to that point, I think that it's important to underline the necessity for a tailored well-being response, tailored for individuals. You know, we are listening not to just identify what the organization should do. We are listening to understand what the individual needs. And maybe that individual needs to not be so engaged with the organization at some point, or to have a different type of engagement. Right. So from the data regarding networking, right, we also explore networking a lot, and going to the qualitative responses, some said that they love networking, while others said it's their worst nightmare. Right? So you do need a tailored response from the organization regarding, what well-being is, how it should be implemented, and whether or not what you as an organization understand by well-being is what the employee understands as well-being. Right? I've seen, for example, programs of community building within organization to improve the state of the community and the relationship, where they would go on, planting excursions or team buildings during the weekend, right? So that is not fostering well-being, because you are actually developing an activity for the organization during the free time of the employee. So, right? So it's important for organizations to listen. Fully agree with that, but listen in order to understand not what they can do, but what they should do from an employee perspective, not from an organization perspective, because at some point we do need to understand there is life outside the organization and not necessarily within. That's how you get workaholics. So yeah, that's what I wanted to contribute.
Thank you. And Dr. Anca.
Yeah, so echoing what everyone has kind of talked about, I think ultimately it's about embedding mental health approaches into the strategy of the organization, or embedding it into the business, the way in which it is run. So I was thinking about this the other day, that it has to start even from the recruitment phase, because we are seeing that survey results telling us that, hey, young people, Gen Zs nowadays, are looking for places that actually cares about their mental health, where they feel that they will be supported. And so this signals to us that when you are recruiting new people into the organization, that's really the best time for you to showcase that, hey, we really care about your mental health. This is the kind of things that we've put in place in order for us to ensure that our employees are well taken care of. And so it's kind of similar to what I do in the classroom, where I tell my students at the start of the semester, I say, hey, at the end of the day, I really care about your mental health, because if your mental health is not great, then you're not going to be able to concentrate in class, and it would have repercussions on your grades, and so on and so forth. And so setting the tone right from the beginning when you're recruiting new employees into the organization is really an ideal time for excellent managers to really showcase that this is a part of our organization DNA. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
So maybe I think, based on listening to all of you, we could conclude that it's organizational listening that it's at the center of leadership and employee well-being. So not just individual leaders and what they could do, but also organizations as a whole, and that organizations need to change rather than people. It was very interesting to listen to all of your findings, particularly respective of mental health, empathy, organizational listening. So there is a lot of food for thought here for those who are listening to us. And speaking of the audience, I would like to remind those who are researchers that there is a special issue of Journal of Communication Management that I'm co-editing with Dr. Joan Meng, and the deadline has been extended by the end of February. So if you would like to submit, if you have done some other research that you would like to present, or similar research that discussed today, please feel free to submit the paper. We have a few more minutes, so I would like to ask my panelists today, is there anything that you would like to say and that I didn't ask that is maybe relevant for your data or your views that you would like to share? Anca, Anton.
Yes, it's just something that it's not. It doesn't come out from the data, but discussing about the relationship between leaders and employees. I think that another dimension that should be addressed at some point is along the lines of who's watching the watchers. So we are talking about mental health and well-being of employees, but how about mental health and well-being of leaders, right, of managers? I mean, there are people to to put it like that. So I that's why this discussion needs to be at organizational level, because an organization should have put in place mechanisms not just for regular employees but for management level, right? Because if management is not feeling well, just let's put it like that, then that will have repercussions on the relationship with the employees, right? So this is another thing that has to be addressed and taken care of within the organization. And I do realize that at some point it's the managers themselves that need to put in place mechanisms for themselves. But this is something that also needs to be done. A little bit self-care, to put it like that, at leadership level, right?
Okay, is there anything anyone else would like to add from the panel? Michal, Chmiel.
Can I just say that along the lines of what Dr. Anton has said, if there are any professionals watching us of all the levels, and if you are ever to receive an invitation to participate in a study, to share your perspective, to share your concerns, do that, because your voices matter. This is ideally the way how academia, informed by the industry, can contribute to a positive change in an industry. So those couple of minutes spent on completing a questionnaire, they do matter, and we are inviting you to complete as many, not putting additional strain on you, in your own time.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? So thank you very much to all panelists for participating and for sharing your views and your research. I trust this was useful to our viewers who were following us live, and to those who will watch us later on YouTube. So we will finish now, and hopefully we will speak about this more, and we will certainly read about this in Journal of Communication Management and reports that we will be releasing soon as part of the EUPRERA network on women in PR. And of course, if you are a practitioner or an academic, don't forget to join EUPRERA. There are great opportunities, and the new director of PR for EUPRERA is actually Dr. Anca Anton, who was together with us on the panel. So congratulations on your role, and hopefully it won't affect your well-being to have so many roles. But we wish you luck in future work at
Thank
the
you.
EUPRERA.
It's quite nice to work with nice people, to be honest. It's one of the main contributors to my well-being at this point.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you soon in some other webinars. And don't forget, roll tide.